that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 407th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey, that's me, and the astonishing Tom Fennell, which is him.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. I knew he was going to say that.
I knew you knew it.
Today is the 25th of February. We're recording this in the afternoon by telecommunication because the BCTV studio is closed, and we hope that COVID-19 will go away because I really like going into the studio and doing this there. But we're starting our show on with news from the 18th of February, which was a Thursday. And I think for the third time, I'm going to say thank you for the people who donated to support this show, because we did achieve our goal, which was a huge sum of money, far more than I could afford. And the other things that I should mention, this show is based on items that show up at my blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And you can go to that and click on the calendar date for the date that we're talking about and find the items. But you can also get them in a couple of different ways from the place where you find this show online, whether it's BCTV or YouTube or wherever. There are links to places where you can download the script that we use, what I call a script. It's not technically a script, but also you can get the, there's a couple of different ways that you can get it that are available there. So
some of these things are well worth seeing.
They are. Absolutely.
Almost mandatory.
Almost mandatory. And by the way, since you mentioned that, I think almost half of what we're going to be talking about this week has to do with Texas.
Texas comes up a lot. Well, it's
lot.
in the news. They ain't supposed to be getting weather like this.
No, they're not. And unfortunately, they haven't been prepared.
Which is their own political problem. They created it themselves.
Well, I think that's true. You know, they decided that they were going to go their own way. So they're not really very well. They are not any better connected to the two power grids in the United States, the big two, Eastern and Western, than they are to the one in Mexico. So the other thing is that they wanted to avoid federal regulation, and the result of that was that they operated in a way which was not very well regulated, and almost nothing was really winterized properly. But we'll get into that.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Almost nothing was winterized properly because, hey, we never have winter.
Well, you know, Tom, my mother and father lived in Austin, and they liked Austin. But one of the things, somebody asked my mother, how do you like Austin? She said, you know, I really prefer places that have 4 seasons.
That's interesting.
And the person who was talking to her could not conceive of the idea that Austin didn't have 4 seasons. But I'll tell you one thing. It's not like New England where we lived, and it's not like Nebraska where she grew up. So there we go. Should we start?
Yeah, let's take a look at that weather map that's up in front of us.
That weather map.
A temperature anomaly map.
Yeah, and I want to point out, this is an anomaly map. It is not a temperature map. And if you didn't know that and you looked at this, you'd say, wow, it's hot in Greenland and it's cold in Texas. Well,
it sort of is.
It was cold in Texas, but this is a map of the difference between
right. What it should be and what it is.
That's right. And Texas was 20 degrees below what it should have been. And by the way, that's degrees Celsius. And 20 degrees Celsius is like 32 degrees Fahrenheit. They were down at 0, which is cold, you know. And then here's Greenland, which is 12 degrees above normal, which means it's 21 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. But it's still colder in Greenland than it is in Texas. Although when I looked into this, I found that there are places in Alaska that were warmer than places in Texas.
I read that too in the article. Well, there it says where it is far colder in Texas than it is in Alaska.
Yeah, and here we go. This is from news.com.au, which means that the article itself actually came from Australia, but it was a fairly good article. So what do you have for title, Tom?
World's upside down weather causing chaos.
Boy, is it ever upside down. A wobble in the weather has turned a chunk of the world's climate upside down, leading to the bizarre situation that it's far colder in Texas than it is in Alaska. The temperature anomaly map from the University of Maine's Climate Change Institute vividly reveals the peculiar situation. By the way, I had a great deal of difficulty trying to find this map at the University of Maine. I finally did. And there's a really interesting, unfortunately, I don't have the link to it. Maybe I should bring it in next week in case anybody wants it. But there's a really interesting site in Maine where you can get maps like this that show you the anomalies. They show you the actual weather, and it's worldwide. You can click on the map and it'll turn the globe for you so you can see what's going on in other parts of it.
I feel like dancing around the room chanting a wobble in the weather. A wobble in the weather.
Should we escape this time? Are you done?
Well, I got a quick takeaway here.
Okay, good.
Normally warm temperatures in the Arctic weaken the jet stream,
Yes.
allowing very cold air to protrude southward in places while warmer air pushes northward elsewhere.
This is
exactly what's happening.
This is a really good point, Tom. I'm glad you brought that up, because what this means is, why are they suffering in Texas? It's so cold in Texas, ironically, because of climate change producing global warming, which is happening twice as fast in the Arctic as it is elsewhere. So the Arctic is warmer than usual, which destabilizes the jet stream, and the jet stream is what holds the Arctic air up in the Arctic. So all of a sudden it spills down. That air in Texas was supposed to be at the North Pole.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
Let's move on here. We got an interesting picture of an electric truck.
An electric truck. There it is. That looks like a bus, doesn't it?
It does. Well, there's no engine in front.
Sorry, I hit the wrong mouse. Yeah, that's right. In this particular
So
article,
it gives each truck an extra 4 feet of space.
well, that's a good way to look at it. This is from Clean Technica, and you have a title, I'm sure.
I do that. Volta Trucks picks Proterra for batteries. We're going to touch base on this again before we're through.
Before we're done. Well, this means that this European company is buying its batteries from Proterra, which is an American manufacturer.
They're in California, right?
They're in California. Well, at least some of their stuff is in California. I don't know that all of it is, but they're big factories in California.
We're going to be talking about Volta again. I don't know if it's one company or more than one with a similar sounding name, but
I think it's the same one.
I think it is the same one, and they're getting very active in this field.
Yeah, they are. Volta Trucks, the new British commercial electric truck startup, has decided to get its vehicle batteries from Proterra, which just opened a next-gen battery production factory in California. There you go. In December, the Volta Zero, designed for inner-city freight distribution, will have a range of 125 miles.
Think UPS trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. UPS, well, this is kind of big for UPS, but you can, if you can build trucks, any size you build is going to be useful for something. And we'll touch
base on that a little bit later.
Absolutely. You have more on this?
Well, the Proterra battery is designed to deliver over 4,000 discharge cycles.
That's a lot.
That means
that these things should go well over 10 years before they need to be replaced.
Well, it's got a range of 125 miles. So this thing is, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they do. That's right. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, let's move on. We got Texas again.
We have Texas again. Here's Texas again. Article.
Texas, quote, grids, blackouts, and Green New Deals.
This is from The Ecologist. The failure of electricity grid in Texas and the blackouts in the Midwest are more consequences of climate breakdown. The root of the problem is that the Arctic is growing warmer, and as it does so, paradoxically, there is less of a barrier preventing very cold weather in the far north from moving south. And I don't know if in fact, I can flip back to that map. If you look at this map, you'll see that, yeah, it was cold in Texas. It was also cold in the eastern part of Russia, which is in the upper right part of that screen. And these are two big chunks of Arctic weather that just moved south. And here we are back in Texas.
So they're growing daffodils in Siberia right now, huh?
Oh man, I'll tell you, we're not just warming up, we're getting into wackier and wackier weather.
Well, for what it's worth, this is a good article, but it's long.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information in this article.
Yep. And
let's move on here. We got a nice picture of a frozen lake in Texas.
oh, we've already
Where did I
seen
hear
that.
name.
We've already seen that article, Tom. We were just talking about it. The next article, we're up to Friday, February 19th.
No, we got another one here. Texas grids, blackouts, and the Green New Deal.
Didn't we read that? Well, let me read it again in case the failure of the electric grid in Texas and the blackouts in the Midwest are more consequences of the climate breakdown.
Yeah, we did read it.
We did read that. Okay, let's go on. We're up to Friday, February 19th, and we have a picture of a forest. I actually grabbed this picture because I didn't see one I liked with the article. And, you know, you can get this, some of the stuff they have at Unsplash, some of these other sites. I really like this picture.
That's a pretty picture, yeah.
It's a pretty picture. This is from CNN.
A new UN report urges a radical shift in the way we think about nature.
Yeah, the UN released a report on the health of the planet that proposes a radical shift in the way that we think about it. The report, which is called Making Peace with Nature, argues that amid our pursuit of wealth and security, humans must now learn to value the Earth's basic natural capital.
Well, the natural capital is the soil and the air and the water.
Yep.
That's what we've got.
That's what we've got. And if you
a quarter of the world's disease burden comes from environmentally related risks.
Yeah.
When we destroy nature, we are destroying wealth. But we consider it GDP growth.
Yeah, this is one of the problems with the paradigm that we see of what is called the free market. It puts value on things that it can monetize. And it finds a great deal of difficulty monetizing the value of what you're seeing in this picture. How do you put a dollar sign in front of that? And I think they're going to have to figure that out, because there isn't any free market approach to dealing with pollution that I know of.
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
That name of the person who took this picture, Lukas Smeagol, sounds like something out of The Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? Anyway, should we go on?
Yeah, we got a very interesting ship coming up.
Yeah, I thought you'd like this one. This is from CNN.
Eco-friendly cruise ships powered by sails.
By sails, by golly. French shipyard, and man, I can't. Chantier
That means shipyard.
Shipyard, there you go.
That's what I mean. Atlantic Shipyards.
Atlantic Shipyards, thank you, Tom, is planning to construct cruise ships topped by striking 80-meter eco-friendly paneled sails made of fiberglass and carbon.
That's 250 feet, by the way.
Yeah, that's 25 stories. The solid sail aerol drive concept would reduce cruise emissions by up to 50%, according to the shipyard.
Well, the large sail would be used in tandem with an engine and propellers. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing I never thought of. The sail's mast needs to tilt, allowing the ships to sail under bridges.
Yes, that, and if you look at those sails, it looks like they're built like accordions or something like that.
Well,
like
they're rigid. Reading in the article, they're rigid. They're not.
They're rigid, yes. But
they have fiberglass.
I think they fold up or something.
They have to do something.
Yeah, they do. And they are able to take those things down, including the masts. They take the masts down with everything else.
I think they would have to. They
would have to in order to get under the bridges. And the other thing that you have to consider about this is if you've got a cruise ship and it takes you from, say, Boston to the UK or something like that, that cruise ship has to sail back again, and the prevailing winds come from the west. So it would have to sail against the wind to get back. And
they figured out how to do that 1,000 years ago.
They did indeed. They could tack, but it means that these ships really do have to be prepared to deal with conditions in which they can't make much headway just on the wind.
You know, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum.
Okay.
I was over in New York State, the New York State Barge Canal.
Yes.
Part of it runs from Albany north to Glens Falls.
Yes.
And there's a highway that parallels it. And I was driving on that highway one day, and 100 feet to my left is the barge canal.
Okay.
And I see this canal tugboat charging down this barge canal, and he's going like hell. He's going as fast as I am.
Oh, really?
And I noticed coming up, there's a bridge. is a bridge across the barge canal.
Yeah.
And I say, holy cow, that guy's not going to be able to stop in time. I better slow down and watch this. Well, doesn't we come to the bridge and doesn't the top of the ship drop down and he goes under the bridge and it comes back up again?
I guess the guy who was the captain of that little tugboat knew something you didn't know.
For sure. It disappointed me, really. I was expecting to see.
You were expecting something exciting. Well, I don't know, but I think having the top of that thing drop down to go under the bridge is kind of exciting.
Well, it sure as heck startled me.
Yeah. Should we go ahead to the next one?
I think we should. I've taken up too much time already.
That's all right. Okay.
Ignoring the pandemic, Americans installed record amounts of solar and wind energy.
Yeah, this is from CBS News. The U.S. added a record amount of solar and wind energy in 2020, despite COVID-19. Figures from Bloomberg NEF and Business Council for Sustainable Energy show wind and solar power installations soared 61% over 2019, with 33.6 gigawatts added to the grid. And we're going to be talking about
gigawatts is gigawatts, baby.
Yeah, it
That's
sure
a lot
is.
of use.
And this is 33 of them. And even with capacity factors being what they are, this is like it's well more than 10 big nuclear power plants, 5 rather big nuclear power plants, and it could be as many
this is
as
the
10.
way of the future. I mean, it's the economy, stupid.
Absolutely, it is, and we're going to see some more of that because we're going to be talking about new renewable energy going in, of all places, to Texas, and we've got some good graphs of that.
Well, let me give you a quick takeaway from here. Large-scale renewable energy plants are now the cheapest source of new power.
Yeah, what about that?
Even without subsidies.
Yeah, even without subsidies. But Joe Biden, president of the United States, wants to subsidize them anyway, and that makes them basically a slam dunk for anything that you want to build these days.
Well, from the article, it says some have tried to pin Texas's grid failures on wind power, while industry analysts point to problems with natural gas and coal plants.
Well, actually,
we'll talk about that again.
We don't have this in this show, but I did see it. The governor of Texas was on a TV station, not Fox News, and he was talking about the problems in Texas, and he was pinning it directly on natural gas. And what he was saying was the natural gas lines froze. And I thought, I was sitting there thinking to myself, methane doesn't freeze all that easily. Well,
the next article coming up is going to talk about exactly that.
Okay, why don't we go to the next article?
Funny picture there.
Funny picture. Okay. There is the picture. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine this happening in your living room?
That's a natural gas plant, guys.
Whoops.
Look
Sorry
at all
about
those
that.
icicles, huh?
Yeah, look at all those icicles. Well, I want you to notice this particular shot is not, and by the way, we're up to Sunday, February 12th, 20th rather. Saturday? Is this? Yeah, you're right, Tom. Thank you. This is from Environment Maine. This particular shot is not of the inside of the plant. This is a roofed over area that is outside of the plant.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you can see railings and things in the background. And, but you can't turn that valve if it's going to be completely covered with ice. How do you deal with this? Okay.
This is a very good article. I highly recommend this article.
Okay, why don't you read the title and I'll read the blurb.
Texas's energy system failed. Here's how it could succeed.
Right. What happened in Texas should be a wake-up call for our entire nation. What happened in February 2021 in the Lone Star State must spur elected officials, regulators, and utility companies across the country to build a better and more resilient energy system. And
here is their fix.
Okay, go ahead.
We must fix 3 crucial vulnerabilities in our current system.
Yeah.
1, we depend on a few centralized power plants to produce most of our energy.
Right.
That's changing as we speak, but it's a problem.
Yes.
2, we rely on transmission lines to carry power from those plants for long distances.
Yes.
Again, it's sort of solving itself. 3, dependence on fossil fuel makes the whole problem worse.
Yeah, and people should really kind of understand this. There are a lot of people who are blaming wind turbines for this because the wind turbines iced up, and solar arrays that wouldn't produce electricity because there wasn't much sunshine and they were covered with snow. But the fact is, wind turbines work in the Arctic. They just do.
They do, and they work in Antarctica.
That's right. And why didn't they work in Texas? Because the people who built them in Texas didn't want to spend the 5% extra that it would require to give them the cold weather options that would de-ice the blades and warm up
They didn't
lubrication.
weatherize them.
They didn't weatherize them. On the other hand, nuclear plants, coal burning plants, natural gas plants all fail when it gets cold enough or wet enough or dry enough or whatever enough, hot enough. They all fail regardless of where they are. So wind turbines in North Dakota don't fail very often, but a natural gas plant in North Dakota could, because those thermal plants depend upon water. There you go. And if the water ices up, the plant shuts down. It's that simple.
Doubling down on the same failed approaches will only set us up for the next disaster.
Yep. And the thing that I was going to say about the governor of Texas, he was saying that the lines froze. And I was sitting there saying methane doesn't freeze that easily. The methane in Texas, one of the things they didn't prepare for was that methane had to have as little water in it as possible. And it was filled with water vapor. And in that cold, the water vapor condensed and froze on the inside of the pipes. And that frozen ice got thicker and thicker and thicker until there just wasn't
So that's why they were failing.
That's why they were failing. It was one reason out of many. There were other reasons too. The compressors wouldn't work because they were too cold. The plants wouldn't work because they couldn't get them cooled. You know, there are a lot of reasons why these plants would fail, but people were trying to pin it on wind turbines. The wind turbines didn't do all that badly, but the big failures were coal and natural gas. Of course, Texas has 4 nuclear reactors, and one of those had to shut down too.
Well, I got this thing from the article that surprised me.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it does.
Okay.
67% of the energy we generate from fossil fuel power plants is lost through escaped heat.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I learned that from a guy at Vermont Yankee, one of the engineers there. I said, how efficient is your plant? He said, well, it's about 35%. The rest of it, he said, all goes into.
There it goes.
And it was
the earth warm.
It was at Vermont Yankee. It was either going into the atmosphere or it was going into the river. That was their choice. And he said the amount of waste heat that was being released by Vermont Yankee was enough to heat every house in Vermont.
All of Vermont, huh?
Every house.
I just said Brattleboro, but it's the whole state.
No. Yeah, the whole state. And he said we couldn't even heat. And then he said Greenfield, because, that's, I don't know, maybe that's where he lived. But he said we couldn't even heat Greenfield because the folks down there would not want pipes put in that would conduct something that they would think might be radioactive to their homes. So they had, and that was something that he felt bad about. But it was like, in his mind, it was something to feel bad about because people didn't want something that they had that was valuable. And, but
well, let's move along here. We got a lovely picture of a plugged gas well.
Yeah, right. We sure do. There it is.
Abandoned wells are a lingering environmental issue.
Yeah, this is from the Observer Reporter. And it seems to me that the Observer Reporter is not in Pennsylvania where that was. It seems to me it was like in Texas. But there are a huge number of abandoned oil and gas wells in the United States. These wells, many of them uncapped, are potential sources of methane pollution. Pennsylvania has somewhere between 300,000 and 760,000 of the abandoned wells.
That's a large number.
Man, possibly 15% of the country's total number. Well, 15%, that would mean that we'd have millions of wells maybe that are abandoned.
5 million.
And, here we are. Here is this thing sitting out in the middle of a field. And I've seen oil wells, with the pump jacks that were abandoned. You can actually, if you know where to look, you can actually see them in satellite pictures. They're all over the place, and some of them have oil spills next to them, so they've got big black patches next to them. Here is one that looks relatively benign, and I'll point out here this particular picture was courtesy of the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association. They're feeling kind of proud of this well. It happens to have been capped correctly.
A lot of them they just walked away from.
A lot of them they just walk away from. In some cases, and particularly now where the oil and gas industry has got a lot of wildcatters in it who are trying to find wells they can frack and, you know, so forth. And they get their money to dig those wells, and they get down there, and if they go bust, they go bust. And then who deals with it? Well,
if it's not plugged properly, that gas is just going to escape into the atmosphere.
That's right. And it's going to poison the atmosphere. And it, you know, that's a problem. So should we go on? Yeah,
we could go on. We got an interesting picture here.
This is an interesting picture. I got to grant you that. This is from Clean Technica. We're still on Saturday, February 20th.
Well, it's a good idea. They're giving away free energy, really. And yes. In exchange for it, they're acting as billboards.
Yeah, that's right. You can do this in Vermont, I guess, where billboards are not permitted. What do you have for a title?
You'd probably get away with it.
Yeah. What do you have for
I'll give you the title here.
Thank you.
GM relies on free electric vehicles charging stations to sell the new Chevy Bolt EUVs. That's a new word on me. EUVs are electric SUVs.
Yes, there you go. Earlier this week, GM slapped images of its splashy new 2022 Chevy Bolt EUV onto the digital displays. That display you're looking at there is digital.
It's a television set.
It's a television set. You could switch that into some other picture easily. Nobody has to come and peel the old one off.
But you can charge people to use these things to display their message.
Yeah, that's right. And they're at hundreds of free electric vehicle charging stations across the United States. With ads like this, GM might just make the EV experience as American as apple pie. Do you know the story about what a New Englander is?
I'll stop you if I heard it.
Okay.
I won't even stop you. Our listeners haven't heard.
Well, this is a story that I heard. And I forget where it comes from, but it was a famous person who said it. To the rest of the world, a Yankee is an American, but to an American, a Yankee is a Northerner, and to a Northerner, a Yankee is a New Englander, and to a New Englander, a Yankee is a Vermonter, and to a Vermonter, a Yankee is a person who eats apple pie for breakfast.
And in New York City, a Yankee is a member of a baseball team.
There you go. Okay. Do we have more on this?
I don't think so. I mean, Basically, these things are free, but they're subsidized by charging for the ads.
Absolutely. And who's gonna plug into one of these things? Somebody who owns an EV and is likely to buy another one.
Well, you can see them whether you plug in or not.
Absolutely. Okay, we are up to Sunday, February 21st, and we have a picture. I want to tell you, by the way, that no cacti were damaged in the course of taking this picture intentionally. This is from
a picture of some cold in Texas.
Oh, I guess it is. This is from the BBC. What do you have for a title for the article?
President declares a major disaster.
Yeah, and
hold on a second. Can you hold on a second?
I can hold on a second.
Yeah, let me go see what that means.
Okay.
One of my neighbors needs some help, but I'll take care of her after this is over.
Okay. I'll make a note.
Where were we?
Well,
I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah.
President declares major disaster is where we are.
That's right. Why don't you read the title and then we can go from there?
I just did.
Yes, you did. Would you read it again?
President declares major disaster.
Yeah. This is from the BBC. President Joe Biden has declared a major disaster in Texas, clearing the way for more federal funds to be spent on relief efforts there. Power is returning across Texas and temperatures are set to rise, but at least 14 million people still have difficulty accessing clean water. And I got to tell you, I've seen pictures of people having water just pouring out of pipes into their living rooms. And
that was one of the biggest problems. Nobody's water was working.
Nobody's water was working, and now that the water is thawed out again, it turns out that the pipes are broken.
Duh.
Yeah, well, you got to be ready for this kind of stuff. And the people in Texas, whether it was the utilities or the apartment owners, the people who owned homes.
Well, let me read this. It kind of repeats itself, but it's still good information.
Okay.
Texas's energy grid was overwhelmed by a surge in demand for heat.
Yes.
As temperatures plummeted to a 30-year low.
Yes.
0 degrees Fahrenheit this week.
Yes.
Nearly 60 deaths have been attributed to cold weather across the U.S. Now, I'm sure that number has increased.
I'm sure it has. This is really kind of heartbreaking. Hold on a sec. Hello. Okay, that was a pernicious phone call. Somebody, I say hello and you get boy at the other end. Okay. Yes, this is where were we, Tom?
Well, we're going to just start another article.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
A picture of Manila. That surprises me.
Well, I look at this, and you might have had this experience too. I learned about Manila from watching Victory at Sea when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and this doesn't look anything at all like the city that I knew from those days. Well,
it's surprising the number of cities and towns across the U.S. and across the world that are building skyscrapers.
Yeah. Well,
Hong Kong has overtaken New York.
Yeah, Hong Kong has the most skyscrapers of any city in the world, and I forget the number of them, but it's almost amazing. It's like thousands, literally, of them. So this is from Inquirer.net, and what do you have for title?
Philippine Department of Energy requires solar and renewable technologies in buildings.
Solar and photovoltaic and renewable energy technologies are now required in, this is the part that really blew my mind, new and existing buildings in the Philippines after the country's Department of Energy issued a policy on the adoption of the guidelines of energy conservation. That is mind-blowing. They're saying existing buildings
it's a big leap forward for sure.
Oh man, this is really kind of astonishing. Do you have more on that?
Well, they're starting off. They're starting low.
Yeah.
A minimum of 1% of the projected annual energy requirement, but that's going to grow.
Of course it is. They're but this is something. This is surprising to me too, because the Philippines. The man who's the president of the Philippines is not the kind of person I would expect to be interested in renewable energy, but nevertheless, there you have it. So should we go on?
Yeah, I got some details here, but they're unimportant.
Okay.
Square footage and stuff like that.
Yeah, our next image is
we got a nice graph coming up here.
This is something that I just thought was absolutely stunning. Where was the last time you saw a graph like this? This is growth, really? This is installed and estimated. And this is in ERCOT, which is where the wind turbines failed, according to the various people. This is the projected growth, and this, of course, was projected before the failure. But it's from Clean Technica. What do you have for a title for the article, Tom?
Texas. What? Texas? Texas is 35 gigawatts.
Gigawatts.
Texas is 35 gigawatts of wind and solar in the next 3 years, boosting grid resilience.
Man,
you better believe they're going to do it now.
Of the Texas power plants that failed.
You got the floor.
Yeah, the majority of the Texas power plants that failed were thermal. Some wind turbines not equipped for cold also failed, but others produced more than expected. In the next 3 years, 35 gigawatts of wind turbines, and this is the really interesting part to me, 26 gigawatts of batteries are set to be added to the Texas power grid.
I think that's an error.
Do you?
I think that 26, I compared the two graphs. And it should be 2.6.
Well, okay, then
it's still a lot.
It's a lot, but it's like if you look at that graph is the installed and the installed estimated cumulative ERCOT battery capacity. Now, that looks like it's an error no matter how you do it. I can't figure that out. It's not 2.5 gigawatts. It would have to be more like 6. from the graph.
Well, it says here more than 2 gigawatts in 2022.
Okay, and another more than 2 gigawatts.
The other graph has a different scale.
Okay. Nevertheless,
we're not going to be seeing the other graph.
This is a huge amount of battery storage, and if they had this stuff online,
absolutely,
it would have made such a huge difference. And of course, one of the things that we can bet now is that as these wind turbines that are scheduled to go in do go in, somebody's going to insist that they be weather hardened for cold weather.
But one of the things they're talking about is all of the articles are about large scale projects.
Yeah.
And they're not even talking about rooftop solar and home energy storage.
Yes.
Which individually might be small, but when you aggregate them together, they're significant.
They're about 40% of the solar power that's installed in the United States. And the federal government, up until a couple of years ago, was completely ignoring that. And the result of that is that their figures on solar power in the United States are all skewed, skewed. I mean, and it's kind of hard to. It's hard to track it. I can understand why they would not really want to, but nevertheless, you can track the number of solar panels that are purchased and see where that takes you. Okay, are we done with that, Tom?
I think so. We got another one moving along here.
Okay, we're up to Monday.
It's about our friends in Washington.
We're up to Monday, February 22nd.
February 22nd.
There we go. This is ice crystals. Yeah. Wow.
Republicans eye federal funds to help pay exorbitant energy bills in Texas. This is an interesting article.
It's an interesting article.
I don't say you got to read it, but it's interesting.
It is. Reportedly, some
nice picture of
ice crystals. Yes. Reportedly, some Texans whose power stayed on now face enormous bills as private companies capitalize. The New York Times reported that one man in Dallas, in the Dallas suburbs, faced an electric bill for nearly $17,000, 70 times his usual bill for all utilities combined. And I think this deserves an explanation. What happened here was that...
Well, it used to be. Well, say what you're going to say, and I'll add to it.
Okay, what it used to be that the utilities were regulated. When they deregulated the utilities,
that's what I was going to say.
Some of the utilities offered.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, they offered the option that a person could pay according to the wholesale price of power. And he would pay relative to that. And what happened was, with the electricity out, and we will see also with natural gas out, the wholesale price of power went up in some cases 100 times what it had been, which meant that if the guy was paying 12 cents per kilowatt hour, he might wind up paying $12 per kilowatt hour. And
that's exactly what was happening.
Now, if you think about it, this really isn't because somebody was gouging him. This is because this guy paid and signed an agreement for this kind of power, and that's what happened. And it doesn't sound fair, and frankly, I don't think it is fair. But nevertheless,
there's a backstory here.
Okay.
When we started the electrical grid here in America back in 1906 or something like that.
Yeah.
They quickly determined it was inefficient to award a territory to more than one utility.
Yes.
You didn't want to have power poles running on both sides of the street.
Right. Absolutely.
And so they came up with this model of a controlled utility where its power was guaranteed in exchange for having a monopoly. Its prices were guaranteed. But they set the prices on the cost of producing that power plus a small margin.
Yes.
And it worked fine for 70 years, and until we got George Bush, and he decided to deregulate.
Right.
And now, at least in most states, the utilities can charge anything they want to, pretty much, and that's what's happening here.
Well,
and they're hooked into certain ways of determining the costs.
Yeah.
And this particular poor guy got screwed.
Well, what happened was he signed an agreement under which there's a formula which can be figured out by a computer. The formula's right there. And the formula says, okay, you're going to pay, let's just say for the sake of argument, 30% more than the cost of the wholesale cost of electricity. Well, okay, that's fine if the wholesale cost of electricity is 9 cents. But what if it turns out to be $9? It means that the utility is going to be charging $3 extra for that electricity, and the guy's going to have to pay it. It's something that he perhaps should have considered before he signed the document, but why would he worry about it going to $9?
This kind of stuff wasn't coming up. It was all
no, it wasn't. That's absolutely right. This was a doomsday scenario in terms of that kind of thing. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, we got a picture of a nice lady from my hometown.
There you go. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and this is an article from Clean Technica.
Texas GOP attacks AOC, that's her, with false claims.
Yeah, this is disheartening.
For trying to help Texans, Americans, and the world.
I've heard them call themselves Texicans sometimes.
I have too, yeah.
Texas GOP Chair Alan West, rather than working to help Texans in a time of dire need, decided to switch the issue. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez raised $2 million for Texans, so he attacked her and clean energy with falsehoods. You know, if this actually is the way it went down, then I have to say that's pretty disgraceful.
Well, they fear her.
Oh, yeah.
She's sharp, she's good looking, she's young. She could be the first female president of America.
Well, maybe.
Yes, she could. She's certainly qualified.
Well, I don't think she's old enough to be president.
Oh, she's not. Definitely not. She wouldn't be old enough to be president for probably another 10 years.
But this is a very bright, very passionate woman who happens, from the point of view of the Republican Party, to be on the wrong side of the political spectrum. And this is a young lady who is quite a buddy of Bernie Sanders.
Well, it's interesting you mention that. They fear her, maybe even more than they fear Sanders.
Well, if Bernie Sanders is getting old,
yeah.
And it's easy. I wouldn't want to do it because Bernie Sanders is also pretty tough. But it's kind of easy to say, yeah. He's, there he is. How long is he going to stay in business? This young lady, she could have 50 years ahead of her of political.
What is she now? 32 or something like that?
Something like that. I don't know exactly, but she is young, and this is a woman with a powerful mind, and the reaction.
She's sharp.
She is sharp. Absolutely. Okay. Do you have more with her?
Well, I think I did. West, the guy that wrote this article, Alan West.
Yeah.
He stated that AOC's Green New Deal philosophy failed Texans. Quite reports that far more natural gas went offline than wind power.
How in the world could he blame this thing on the Green New Deal? They don't have a Green New Deal in Texas.
They don't even have one down there.
It's not the Green New Deal taking over and failing them. It's the threat of the Green New Deal.
That's exactly right.
This is so absurd, and yet there are people who take it seriously. Okay, we should probably go on, and we have. We got
another picture of some ice on a fence.
We have a picture
and
of
more
ice
about Texas.
More about Texas. Well, why can't we get away from Texas? This article is from Clean Technica.
Texas government just, quote, decided 60% of the population wouldn't get power for a few days, unquote.
Yeah, and this also is somewhat disheartening. It's been a crazy week of snow, ice, rolling blackouts, and sadness all across the South, but especially in Texas. The government of Texas, looks like it mismanaged the grid completely. You could say that again. It even looks like it intentionally was freezing the state's poor. And one of the things they were talking about was the fact that there were people, in frozen buildings, and within plain sight of them were skyscrapers with the lights on.
With the lights on. I read that.
What do you do about that?
The New York Times reported that the blackouts are hitting minority neighborhoods especially hard.
Especially hard. And, I don't know what to say to that. If that's what was happening, and the utilities in Texas were favoring people who were big businesses and so forth, it's go ahead, Tom.
No, You finish what you were going to say.
No, I'm pretty much done. Go ahead.
Well, let's hit Tuesday, February 23rd. We got a nice picture of a flood in South Carolina. Those aren't
Actually,
green lawns, folks. That's a flood.
I don't think that flood is actually in South Carolina. I think that's in Texas too. And it was the South Carolina National Guard who was they had people in Texas lending a hand. But
It could be.
yeah, this is from
But
CNN.
South Carolina's got a coastline, so it could be.
It could be, absolutely, it could be, and that coastline does flood. What do you have for a title?
Flood risk is growing for U.S. homeowners due to climate change.
Yeah.
Current insurance rates greatly underestimate the threat.
And when I read that, I was stunned, absolutely stunned. Okay. A report finds that homes covered by the National Flood Insurance Program face losses each year that dwarf the costs of their premiums. The premiums only cover about 1/5 of the average cost. And the reason I was stunned by this was because I did a study on these things. I'm going to say 5 years ago. And the study, I looked at the increase in the cost of flood premiums in the period of 1979 to 2015. And what I found was, if you account for the inflation, the increase in the number of people in the country, which means you've got more places that have to be insured, you count, the various things. What it says is that the cost of the flood premiums during that time should have gone up by a factor of about 5.5. But they didn't. They went up by a factor of 47.
And it's still not enough.
And it's not enough. And I mentioned that to somebody, and he said, well, people are building houses and things in places that are vulnerable. And I got news for you. There is no way they could build enough houses in vulnerable places to account for that kind of difference. And then on top of that, there was an act that was put into law that was to address exactly that problem, which says that if you put in 2 claims, both in excess of $1,000 in any 10-year period for a property on flood insurance, that property is no longer qualified to get flood insurance from the National Flood Insurance Program. So which is a federal guarantee on flood insurance. That program was brought about because they figured out that if you had 2 F5 hurricanes hit the United States in the same year, it could wipe out the entire industry when it came to flood insurance. So they needed a federal program just to make sure that the industry could survive. And the program is supposed to keep the premiums up at the same time as the increase in payouts. But for some reason, which is not accounted for in this article, in the last 4 years, that wasn't kept up.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening is, how would you say it, to build a oceanside home, you generally don't build a shack.
That's probably right. Yeah.
These are all high-class homes, really nice homes.
They are.
And when they get damaged, it costs a lot to rebuild them.
Yep. Okay, we should probably go on, Tom. And this picture does not look all that interesting, but it is.
It's a plant in Denmark that is taking care of wind turbines. That's what those are. They're wind turbine parts.
They're wind turbine parts. And, when I first saw that, I said, what is all of that? And then I realized those round things that taper are parts of the masts.
Exactly.
And that big, almost rectangular gray area with the red stripes in the middle is a long line of blades. And this is in a port in Denmark. And we have the article came from Renew. So why don't you read the title for the article?
Danish green ammonia plant.
Danish.
That's the title.
Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners unveiled plans to build Europe's largest power-to-X facility in Denmark.
Power to ammonia.
Well, in this case, it is. It could be taking power to something else too.
That's exactly what it means.
But it means in this case power to ammonia. In Denmark, to use offshore wind power to create green ammonia. CIP said the plant would have a 1 gigawatt electrolyzer. That's a lot.
That's big. That's
big. That's a big electrolyzer. And the ammonia would be used both as a fertilizer and as a fuel.
Yep.
And we've been talking about using ammonia as a fuel.
It's going to become more popular.
It is. One of the things that I find interesting about this is that they don't really have a market for ammonia as a fuel.
Yet.
But, and they're not the only ones who are addressing this market that doesn't yet exist. but there's a lot of money going into it because the advantages of using ammonia as a fuel are absolutely huge. So
Well, it's interesting. Interesting subsidy here. Excess heat from the facility will be
yes,
used to heat nearby homes.
well, yeah, that's like, Vermont Yankees supplying heat to Greenfield or Brattleboro or whatever.
They could easily serve Brattleboro.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they can't anymore because they're
Can't
closed
anymore.
down. But there you go. Should we go
Well,
on?
there's still heat emitting from the plant.
Well, yeah, but it's
It's not the same.
it's not the same. Okay,
Oh,
our
we got
next.
a nice picture coming up of a power plant,
By golly,
and that is pollution.
yeah, that is smoke coming out.
That's smoke coming out.
Yeah.
And it says that U.S. coal capacity factor dropped from 67.1% in 2010 to 47.5% in 2019.
That's a
I
drop
don't
of.
understand what they mean by capacity factor.
Okay, basically what happens here is you have the nameplate capacity of a plant. Let's say it's a gigawatt plant. So if you run that plant for a year, you'd have 365 times 24 times a gigawatt, and that would give you the number of gigawatt hours that you could get if it was running at 100% all the time. That
But
would
it's
be
not running at 100% all the time.
absolutely. So you find out how much it actually did produce, and then you divide
That's
that.
the capacity factor.
That's the capacity factor. And here, what they're saying is these coal plants were running the equivalent of a little bit more than 2/3 of the time at 100%, or, as I said, the equivalent. Now it's pretty much below 50%. And that is despite the fact that a whole bunch of unproductive coal plants have closed. So they're not even counted in this. And what's happening here is that the coal plants that we've got at a lower capacity factor, their fixed costs stay the same, their income drops. That means they get more and more marginal when it comes to whether they can pay off. And we're going to see more coal burning plants shut down. There's just no way around that.
Well, in this case, capacity means potential.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be using all of that capacity. And they're saying for the coal burning plants, it's dropping, and it's dropping rapidly.
Absolutely. We are up to Wednesday, February 24th, and we have a picture of a truck with a wind turbine blade.
Interesting. We've shown this picture or somewhat similar picture before.
Okay.
And that trailer in the back is very, very long.
Very long. That's right. It could be, I don't know. I don't know how long those blades are. This is one of the reasons they don't build the huge power plants, wind turbines that they put out at sea. They don't put those on land, and part of the reason is because the longer
they can't get the blades down
they
there.
can't get the blades. Yeah, absolutely. This thing could be a couple 100 feet long, and that is a long truck.
Well, we've talked about exactly that, where they're building these plants on the water so they can deliver the blades by water.
Absolutely. Okay, this article came from Clean Technica. What do you got for a title?
Wind turbine blades can be recycled.
Yes, the wind industry has one of the lowest composite waste rates. Over 85% of the turbine can be recycled. The composite blades are a small part of the overall materials. Despite how little of the negative impact of the blades is, the wind industry is tackling the problem with a project called Decom Blades.
Well, that's that says it all.
Yeah.
They're having a hard time recycling these things because it's difficult.
Yeah.
And often they just throw them away.
Yeah.
So there's Decom Blades, which is a joint project between 10 wind power companies.
Yeah.
It's trying to develop ways to recycle the parts of composite blades that can't be readily recycled today.
One of the things
they're going to succeed.
One of the things that I found interesting, they listed a couple of different ways that they could recycle these things. But one of them that I found interesting was they take the blade and they shred it into probably long, thin pieces. And then they can use those pieces for reinforcing concrete.
Okay.
And it reminds me of, years and years ago, I heard about how during the Second World War, the Germans had to reinforce concrete, and they had all these Russian rifles they were capturing, and they would just take the metal parts off and throw them into the concrete to reinforce them.
No kidding.
No kidding. And then they ran out of those, and they didn't want to use steel for this. So they hunted around, and they finally came up with something which is a little surprising, but it worked. And that is they would reinforce the concrete with glass rods.
Okay. That would work.
Yeah. Glass is fine as long as you don't try to bend it.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Stretches real nice.
Here you go. And now, Tom, we should go on. Our next item is a picture of Dallas. We're back to Texas again.
Back to Dallas.
Yeah, there it is.
Dallas with snow on the ground.
Dallas with snow on the ground. And this is from CNN.
Regulators examine Texas energy market after natural gas prices soared 10,000%.
Yeah.
That's 100-fold.
Yeah, this is the same thing I was talking about. We were talking about earlier, except now it's electricity instead of, natural gas instead of electricity. Federal regulators are looking closely at the Texas energy market after natural gas prices rose by up to 10,000% during last week's deep freeze. They warn that extreme weather will play havoc with energy sources, including natural gas, coal, nuclear, and to a lesser extent, wind. But, here again, you're talking about all of the problems that, you saw the icicles on the valve and stuff like that. They just had a miserable time because they were not ready for, maybe there's a woman who writes for Clean Technica who says she's not a right-wing nut, but she is a prepper. And
okay.
And they have to think like a prepper. What are you going to do if something goes wrong, which is what the preppers are thinking about.
Well, they didn't think like that in case of Dallas.
In the case of Dallas,
that's right. All of Texas, for that matter.
Yeah.
Energy Department officials said the power crisis was largely driven by coal, gas, and nuclear sites going offline.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And then the poor people in Texas who had, apartments and homes that were heated by natural gas couldn't use the gas because you need electricity for most burners to burn it. And on top of that, the natural gas lines were just not feeding properly. So, what do you do? I don't know.
You blame it on windmills.
Yes, right. That's what you do. You blame it on windmills. Okay, our last
We got the last article coming up. It's an interesting picture of a battery pack.
A battery pack. This is from Clean Technica.
Modular battery system from Zerotech could easily electrify the construction equipment market.
Yep.
This is about all those machines you see when they're building houses.
That's right. Big machines. Combining 7 variants of modules with a choice of battery cell chemistry, a new turnkey modular battery system from Zerotech promises to revolutionize the construction equipment market by offering manufacturers a battery pack for just about everything. And when they say everything, they mean some of those big 20-ton earth-moving trucks or cranes or
all of those things.
All of those things.
And it makes sense for them to be battery powered because a lot of them are kind of idle most of the time. They're just waiting to be used.
That's right.
And the engines are running. And
that's really hard on the engines. That
sure it is.
Really is. And
it screws up the atmosphere.
Yeah, this is a good.
Here they just shut them off.
Yeah, this is a good system, I think. Okay, I think we're done for the day, Tom.
Well, it says here that did we? Yeah, I guess we did. The battery packs are scalable.
Yes.
From 50 kilowatt hours to 250 kilowatt hours.
And 250 kilowatt hours is a lot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Especially if
this looks like it's found its right market.
I think so. Okay, we're up to that's it for the show. So we hope that everybody has a week that is totally okie dokie. That's what my last slide said.
If you can see me, I'm waving goodbye.
So am I. It is absolutely true. I am waving right now. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, as they say.
Good. We had some good stuff this week.
Yeah, I think so. Bye-bye.
Adios.